Thanks everybody for coming. I think this is probably, Jennifer, this might be the first all-media paddle sports panel that we've ever had at Outdoor Retailer, at least on this stage, I think. And thank you for coming. My name's Scott McGregor. I'm the founder and publisher of Rapid Media that produces a bunch of titles, Rapid Adventure Kayak, Canoe Roots Kayak Angler, and a Real Paddling Film Festival. And I've lined up a fantastic panel here of other paddle sports media. Jeff from Canoe and Kayak, editor, and Kayak Fish Magazine. That's right? You do both of those
yeah,
now?
I call myself the executive editor of Kayak Fish Magazine, which means I let most of the other people do the work and hope for the best.
Great. Rick Burnley, editor of Kayak Angler Magazine. Reed is the publisher of Stand Up Paddle Magazine.
Yeah, we got 3 titles now.
Tell me all about your titles.
We've got Stand Up Paddle Magazine, which is kind of a lifestyle adventure magazine. And then we got a women's magazine called Samada, which means balance on the water for women, which kind of ties into the whole fitness, wellness, and just, we're trying to encourage women to get on the water and experience what it's all about. And then we have our gear guide, which is our third magazine publication.
Thanks. Roberto here. Where are you, Roberto? I don't know if I'm going to do this right, but you and your partner Bella publish the Expeditioners blog and Expeditioners magazine.
Yep, and our main thing is social media, so Facebook, Instagram, and now
Great.
Snapchat.
John down at the end is one of a bunch of editors who puts out Stand Up Journal, correct?
Yes.
All right. So when Outdoor Retailer originally pitched the idea of me putting together this panel, they wanted to talk about paddle sports trends, and she said, well, why don't you just ask everybody what what's the coolest thing that you've seen here at the show? And I think you originally pitched it on day one, and we can't do that on day one. But it's also for me anyway, it's one of the most frustrating questions that I get here because it's really hard to pin down what the one coolest thing is at the show. So, and the problem with asking what's the coolest thing is if you think back to high school, turns out that some of the people that were the coolest in high school, when you look back, probably weren't actually all that cool. And I think that's probably, I don't want to pick something that I think is cool now and look back in 20 years and think it may not be. So what I thought we'd do instead is kind of look at instead of individual products, but some of the trends that we're seeing here at the show and talk about where we hope they're going and maybe poke a little fun at some of the trends from before that we're kind of glad that are no longer trends. How's that, guys?
That sounds good.
That's a good one.
Yeah?
That's a good way to start.
I have a bunch here, but does anybody want to shoot something out to begin? John, you look very thoughtful over there.
I think having been here 8 years in a row, I used to sell $100,000 trade show booths, so I'm cognizant of bring the office to the booth, make money. Because all these people work so hard in the SUP industry. They have to set up, do the outdoor day, bring it down here, it's insane. And what I see this year is just the quality of all the sub-products. If you can touch anything, it's amazing. Everything is up there now, I think. And that's great.
So an overall increase in quality?
Total quality. I mean, really up there quality. Some of the resorts are trying to buy new products and they're asking for the best, not just cheap anymore. And that's great for the industry.
What do you think about I was having this, trying to get ready for this, I was asking people at dinner what they thought one of the biggest trends was, and they said inflatable stand-up paddleboards.
Right.
It's
But now they're light, and they're chambered, and you see them everywhere at all the lakes. And that's the new demographic. They're 40 to 50 years old, and they've got 2 hard boards, and they like them, they're good boards, and they go, I'm shopping for an inflatable, because we're traveling to our house, or the boat, or whatever. And that's a great market.
And you think those people this is their second or third board?
Second.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
We see a lot of that in the paddling space. And NRS, for example, makes a lot of inflatable drop stitch stand-up boards. And it's a great product to have on the back of your raft on a multi-day rafting trip. And one of the trends, if we're going to talk about trends, I guess, is I see products being used or developed in kind of different innovative ways for ways of going out and having fun that, in previous years, we didn't have a specific product line that you would put on the back of your raft and go down and surf a standing wave. But now you can do that, and I think the manufacturing has gotten and the design has gotten more nimble over the years, that we're able to do designs that are a little less segmented. No longer is it sea kayaks, whitewater kayaks, recreational kayaks. There's a little bit of a blurring of the lines, and what that means for the individual consumer is there's probably a product out there just for you. Whatever crazy idea you can think of that where you want to go have fun on the water, you're going to find somebody in this building that's making something that you're going to be able to use in that way. And so that's a cool, I guess you'd call it a macro trend, but I think that's a cool trend.
I think on that point, I've seen people are now taking the SUPs down rivers, and that's not something we expected to happen at the beginning. Right. And now everyone's, and especially with the inflatable ones, you're able to smash them up, bang them up, and they're not going to crack in half on you. So yeah, definitely noticed that as well.
Yeah, I think it's been fine-tuned over the last 4 years. I mean, look at the fins now. You got collapsible fins that can go sideways and come back without breaking off, and that was a big thing 4 years ago. For some reason, every time I think inflatable, I think 10.6 is kind of the norm, but you got the 12.6s that people take out for touring, and with a lot of companies really trying to improve and get quality product, it's just constantly been fine-tuned. And I think this year, the last 2 years, I've seen so much happen in that whole trend of inflatables. One thing I also noticed this year, the last 2 years, when we first came to Outdoor Retailer 7 years ago, there was this kind of like in the SUP industry, everybody kind of knew each other. But you know how you grow up as a kid? You see this growth where everybody knows each other, you see each other at events, but especially at this show, I see a warm kind of atmosphere of different companies, and you can kind of talk to each other now without feeling like what those guys are doing, and what is he doing, what's he talking about. Everybody kind of came together to kind of like work together, and with somebody like Krista right here with Supia, it kind of just really brings it even closer together, which we need. Definitely need that.
One of the things that I just want to talk about technology for a little bit and maybe jump away. In the canoe world, we've lost our major, or not one major, it'd be one of the materials like Royalex has gone. And I thought it was quite interesting over at the Sea Eagle booth, they've taken what I would know as a stand-up paddleboard inflatable material drop stitch, and they built a canoe out of it, which I'm not sure if it's the coolest thing I've seen here, but it was certainly something. I mean, there's not a lot of canoes here, so to take a technology that we're using in one section of this show and build the canoe's one of the oldest things around. It's like, I'd love to get in that boat and see how it's going to perform.
And that's we ran a piece actually in the current issue of Canoe and Kayak magazine. Here's your plug. If you pick up, I think you can get out there at the front, but we published a story/boat review by Darren Bush, and I think the title is What's After Royalex, and the subtitle is Don't Panic, because when we all heard in the paddling, the canoeing business that Royalex, this material that for the last 30 years has been the canoe material, the indestructible, the stuff that you take up to the far northern trip and it won't let you down, well, they stopped making it. So an awful lot of canoeists, myself included, were pretty nervous about what's going to happen. And we've seen a lot of material innovation in the type of materials that you're making canoes out of. And it's variations on composite, variations on plastic, but it's exciting to see that there are, and you can read the article, there's 4 different materials that we honed in on 4 different boats, and they're all, they all have their own advantages. They're all better than Royalex in certain ways, and not as good in other ways, but there's just a lot of variety out there for consumers right now.
Good riddance. Thank you, Poly One, for killing a 30-year-old technology so we can innovate, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's like necessity is the mother of invention,
Well, we
And-
use track kayaks a lot, and those, I don't even know what material they're made out of, but we're able to fold them into a golf bag, take them around the world, and then come back. And that's an innovation that's been around for 3-4 years now, and it just changes our ability to paddle all over.
Absolutely.
Another thing in
Absolutely.
technology that we love is the Suunto Ambit watches, because it's revolutionized that we're able to track where we paddled, how fast we were going, how fast our heart rate was going, the distance that we crossed, and then you put it on a topographical map and see it when you get home, and it's just awesome.
What about adventure? What do you guys think about? I saw the pack rafts that in this room alone. There's Air has them, NRS has them, Advanced Elements across the hallway. I feel in the last few years we've been, I don't know if we've been trying to, we're trying to bring the sport so it's more accessible to more people, and I think that means a lot of times taking the adventure out of it. Recreational kayaks, stand-up paddleboarding. Yes, there's people doing lots of adventures on them, but really I think the appeal is a grab-and-go sport. It's something you can do after dinner or for a short period of time, and I think it's cool to see pack rafts coming back in, which is all about adventure. I mean, it's not really about the paddling. I suspect they don't paddle all that well, but it's a matter of putting it in your backpack on a fat bike trip where you can get across to more trails or ride up and float back.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I guess I'll beg to differ a little bit. I think the Zach Podmore, my online editor, had the new Alpaca, the Alpacalypse, which is a great name for a raft. And this is it's made out of a defense grade, I don't even know, ballistic something. But the material for this raft, they're investing $1,000 just for the material. It's a high pressure tube, and Zach was able to roll it. He said it felt as stable, or he says it felt as good as a hard shell, and it was as stable as an IK. And he was able to take it down the Elwha River. He and one of our photographer contributors actually did the first source to sea on the Elwha River since they removed the dams last year. And they had as you say, an adventure. They had a crazy adventure. They didn't read the maps very carefully before they started, and they thought they had a 10-mile hike in. They wound up having a 30-mile hike in, but you've got a pack raft that weighs 6 pounds, and you're young and fit and dedicated. You can get all the way up into the headwaters of a river that there's really no other way you could get there. You couldn't get there with a 50-pound creek boat. But you've got a craft that has good enough performance that you can run Class 4 whitewater in an exploratory situation where you really don't want to screw up. And yeah, it's just, I'm rambling here, but the pack raft I think it really is a revolution. We hear about the pack raft revolution. It's bringing a lot of new blood into the sport. It brings a lot of explorers from other sides of this show, the climbing guys, the hiking guys that are coming in, and they see the pack raft as it's opening their horizons into rivers, into whitewater. And so you get a lot of really cool kind of compound trips that create adventure out of a lot of different pieces.
Are we still talking technology or adventure?
We can do whatever you like. Yeah, I was jumping around there because.
I mean, on the adventure side, from what I see, our goal is to get people in the water, just to feel the stoke and then really get into it. And I think it takes a second or third generation of boards that they go through that process. Then they go, okay, I need that inflatable because now I'm doing a travel trip. And I think in Europe, especially in Europe, I notice more inflatables happening just because people travel in trains. It's easy to just pack up.
They have small houses.
What's that?
And they got small houses,
Yeah.
so they're able to keep them easily.
Yeah, and Europe, you got water everywhere to travel, so you got that. I personally like a hardboard, just because I'm more ocean, but I do a lot of flat water as well. So I have to cross over and do both. But inflatables are fun. I actually just got one to take inland because I got a conversion van that I take traveling now. So it's good because I can just pack it. I don't have to rack it on top of the van and just go everywhere.
Scott, you were saying that on the adventure that we usually as extremer athletes, we see adventure as going down crazy rivers and doing
Yeah.
more extreme
Yeah.
things. But I think it's relative to the people that are coming into the sport.
Yeah.
Because adventure to the person that never has been paddleboarding is getting just on a lake and going out
Yeah.
for his first spin.
Just the real basic.
Exactly. And then he starts to upgrade when he
Yeah.
wants to get and become what we consider, I guess, a bit more extreme in adventure.
Yeah.
I guess I just meant in terms of adventure, in terms of time commitment, is what
Right.
I was getting at.
Yeah.
A lot of, yes, that's where I was going with that.
Cool.
Rather than something to do after work, something you would do for a day or for a weekend or for a 5-day expedition.
Yeah.
So which
That's
used,
what I
which
see
used
as
to be the
adventure.
norm.
The 5-day expedition.
Yeah. I mean, I know exactly where you guys are coming from, and I'm talking in terms of the general public or the consumer. I mean, if it was me, it's like if I see a swell in Hawaii, I'm going back to surf, you know.
Yeah.
But the average consumer will find the time on the weekends or after work, and having a hard, you know, if you got an hour of sunlight and you got to pump that up. If you don't have a pump, man, you're just like you're pumped. Then you got to roll it up when you're done.
Sometimes you just look at it and you're like, maybe not.
And I've seen that happen, like in the dark. What are you guys doing? Oh, I'm just trying to roll my board up.
Yeah.
So having a hard board, you know, is
You know, one thing, and I'm not sure this is a trend or not, it's just something I've seen in a couple of booths on just walking past the subsection, is some segmented subs that kind of, they fit together. They've got a mechanism where it's a 3-part.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a hardboard that's in 3 parts. You don't need a rack for your car. It is portable. You can, you know, if you're in Europe, you can put it on a train. And we're seeing the same thing with, you know, Point 65 over here on the kayak side has been doing that for a number of years, but they've got, you know, 6 different models, I think, that come apart into modular pieces, come together pretty easily, and even things like you've got a kayak that can where you can turn it from a single into a tandem just by adding sections.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't think it's for everybody, frankly, but I think for certain people, for, you know, if you had a family with a small garage and you wanted to, you know, sometimes take out a single kayak, sometimes take out a double, it's a cool innovation. You know, I guess it goes back to that. There's the thing that there's something for everybody at this show.
I don't think we could finish a trends discussion without talking about the trend of getting kids in the outdoors and what a lot of the manufacturers have stepped up in the last, not just this year, but the last couple of years. And I think you guys are just all going to nod agreement on this. You're going to chime in. I mean,
that's a good one.
Jackson Kayak has now a new fishing boat that is 100% for kids, which I think, I mean, as my kids are 9 and 10, so it's doing 2 things. It's getting kids in at an early age, and the ski industry knows that if they come in by grade 5, if they skied by grade 5, they spend exponentially more over their lifetime. And I don't have a study to support this, but I can't see why that wouldn't be the same for paddle sports.
Yeah.
So it does that, but it allows me to get on the water more because I can bring my kids. So I think it's doing 2 things. It's investing in kids at a young age for all of our future success, but also it gets, as parents, we're on the water more. Which,
well, you know, Scott and you and I have had this conversation offline about, you know, it's our usual conversation here at the show.
Yep.
How are you? How are your kids? Where'd you take your kids paddling this year? Tell me your story about paddling with your kids. And it's really, I mean, as you know, anybody here or out there who's a parent, what you want to do, your number one goal in life is share with your kids what you love, show them the way, and to get them, you know, into the water, into the surf, onto the rivers. I mean, so yeah, that's it. I guess I'm not answering it's a trend, but I think it definitely pulls at all of our heartstrings. And I mean, kudos to companies like Jackson that are, you know, creating the boats that are sized right for kids so that you can get them out, and you know, you can take that step where you let them out of your boat, and put them in their own, and you send them out and let them discover on their own.
I truly am. It's like, spend the money.
Like, this boat's an awful lot lighter now, isn't it, Scott?
But you see that a lot in kayak fishing too. Now these boats that can be configured in different ways to, go by yourself, take the wife and the kids. I was just up at Malibu Kayaks, and they have a boat where, you can sit in it by yourself in the middle, you can throw the wife in the back, you can throw the kid in the front facing you, or you can just paddle it by yourself. You were talking about the .65 boats, kind of the same idea too, and it's easier to convince the wife, to buy this boat if you can convince her she can go along and the kid can go along, but then you can also think in the back of your mind, hey, I can take this thing out by myself too. So
I think women probably want to bring the husbands too.
Yes.
It works both ways, right?
yeah.
Let me ask, how many of you actually paddle, stand-up paddle? Raise your hand. When this thing first, I call it started blowing up about 8 years ago, it's like surfing, because I came from a surf background. That's kind of been my last 25, 30 years. Kids who started surfing were riding their father's surfboard. And over the last 3 or 4 years, all the companies have fine-tuned their boards and paddles, even fins, for kids that are coming up. You'd see the kids with these long paddles just trying to, and then on these bigger boards. But now if you look at some of the booths, you see boards that are made for smaller people and for women, but also for kids. I mean, the paddle blades have gotten so, not precise, but fine-tuned where it's actually for kids. And with like paddle academies and all these youth programs that are starting up, especially in California and in Florida, and these race events where you have like the different brackets for younger kids, it's just like really fulfilling that need to have a reason for these kids with, that trend of smaller, more fine-tuned equipment.
On that point of accessibility, like what we like with Pelican boards is at first we used to see that they're super expensive, all the boards, and we got like, ooh, we're going to spend that much and stuff, and Pelican came out with these really inexpensive boards that we could bang up that are good for the kids to throw around, and I find it allows a lot of people to get into the sport, whereas originally they would have said, ooh, that price tag's maybe too much for that carbon fiber board, but with a board that you don't mind the kids banging up or yourself throwing it on the car and chucking it around, it means you get into a sport a lot faster and then evolve into wanting the carbon fiber one later on.
Yeah, one of the trends that I've seen at this year specifically is motorized kayaks, and that's another issue of accessibility. Some people look at it as like, oh, that's taken away from the sport, you're not paddling anymore, or, it's just for lazy guys or whatever. But really the way I look at it is, people who maybe can't paddle or maybe have a disability or whatever, now they can get into kayak fishing or kayaking as well and get that same excitement, but without having to paddle, so it includes them in the sport as well.
I think absolutely. And one thing I think you see more in the kayak fishing, which is more of a sportsman market. A lot of the people that are enthusiasts for kayak fishing are they're fishermen first, and they come from a world where you go around in a boat. Yeah. And to have a kayak that kind of is moving, and I think a general trend you'll agree in fishing kayaks is moving more towards what you think of as a traditional fishing boat. It's wider, it's more stable. You can stand in it, you can stand and cast, and I think kayak fishing is almost coming into its own as an industry, and it's leaving some of the kayak roots behind a little bit, and it's really finding the sweet spot where sportsmen want to be.
And you can sit on some of them now too, no?
Stand,
stand, sit.
Stand and sit.
Take a nap while the fish is being caught.
So let's talk.
But one thing too is it's not guys coming from boats to kayak fishing. A lot of times it's guys coming from the shore to kayak fishing or from the pier to kayak fishing. They don't have maybe the money to get into a boat, but they want to be out there a little bit farther than they can cast from the shore or the pier. And so now it's given them that ability. Right. I don't know if it's a stepping stone to buying a boat later on, but they at least feel like they're part of the of that scene. Stand-up paddleboarding I think is a big draw to that. Is when I was a kid growing up, if you were inland, I grew up on the coast, but if you were inland, you bought the OP shirt, and the jams, and you were part of the surf scene, but you never went surfing. But now with stand-up paddleboarding, you can buy the OP shirt and the jams and get on a stand-up paddleboard and feel like you're part of that whole scene. And I think that's the same thing with the kayak fishing too.
You guys notice? You guys have any kind of
Did
idea?
I just date myself with OP and jams?
Is there a ratio? Is there a ratio of how many kayakers are now standing up and
paddling kayaks?
Yeah.
Well, I would say I haven't done any research, but I would say definitely a majority of fishing kayaks are designed for stand-up fishing.
Yeah.
to be able to stand up in.
And you're seeing that kayaks change a lot from evolving from a sit-on-top kayak that has molded footwells and stuff like that. Now you see the decks are almost universally flat, and you've got a very comfortable seat because you're gonna be out there till you catch something, right?
Right.
So you got the beer holder.
Yeah, you can be out for a long time. And comfort is very important. Stability, fishability is how you think of it. But you're standing and you're sitting at the same time. And there's I would say a class of, I'm not sure you'd call it an SUP or a kayak, but
crossover.
There's kind of a crossover, kind of a sup yak. Usually there's a cooler mounted on the back that you can sit on,
right.
or a seat that goes in front.
So I had a note here, and I was going to ask you guys, who's driving that? A couple years ago, there was 1 or 2 stand-up SUP angler boards, and now everybody has them. Is that the industry pushing this out, or is there enough?
Yeah, that was one thing I was noticing as a trend as well. In kayak fishing, a lot of times when kayak fishing kind of first started, the industry pushed a lot of trends and they kind of fizzled out or developed into something serious that anglers would really use. And I wonder that same thing about the stand-up paddleboards. There seems to be a lot of fishing stand-up paddleboards. I just don't know how many stand-up paddleboard fishermen there's going to be.
I got a son in Hawaii. That's all he does is fishes off his
paddleboard.
I got a boat board and I shipped it to Hawaii because I wasn't fishing in San Diego. And that's all he does. He goes, I need another one. Mine's getting beat up. This is like 6 years ago, and he's completely hooked on it.
But it gets them off of shore.
Yeah. What's that?
As a kid, it gets you off of shore. You're no longer stranded with all the fishermen on shore. You're able to get out there.
Yeah.
It's a total different
It's almost
feeling.
like an advantage because there's nobody else out there.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if you see a pile of fish and he's the only one out, I have friends in San Diego because the ahi's running right now. They go right into the pile and they have bags and they're hooking them left and right, and it's like 30, 40 pound ahi.
All the people on shore just looking enviously at the guy.
I think there is, I'll just say anecdotally, Reed, similar situation. We're in Southern California, Dana Point, and I rarely paddle out there without seeing somebody on a stand-up board with the fishing. If it's flat, if there's no surf, there'll be guys out.
Yeah.
Look, maybe they're surfing if there's surf, but if there's no surf, they'll paddle out.
Yeah.
But folks camping with the family, and if the surf goes flat or the tide's wrong, they'll go fish for a couple of hours. It really is it's such a one of the things I think is a huge appeal of the stand-up paddleboard is it's such a versatile craft, and you see it being used all different ways. Like our guys from our colleagues from SUP Magazine just went down into Baja with stand-up boards and spear guns. So they weren't fishing, with rod. I think one guy brought a rod and reel.
Right.
Everybody else was diving off of the SUP, and that's the SUP is great for that. It's so
I got
easy
friends
to
who
get
got
out of.
lobster traps. They just drop it off.
Lobstering,
And they're in season. They're picking them up left and right.
But it must be more of a challenge to reel in a big fish while you're standing on a SUP trying to keep your balance as well. So it adds another factor to it, no?
Yeah.
A little bit.
It's the adventure side.
If you have to, you can sit down though to reel.
All right.
Just don't tell Rick. No style
photo
points
won't
for
be
that,
the same.
but,
Let's talk about whitewater for a sec. So where's whitewater going?
Well, if I knew, Scott, I would tell you.
That's one.
I think that the trend is kind of that blurring of the lines. We've seen the crossover boat for a number of years, and the crossover boat is a longer, kind of an extended creek boat that usually has a hatch in the back, and it's something that you could do a multi-day
It's actually about roughly the same length of a boat as the boats that started the whole thing, right? It's like about the same length of a
back
dancer.
to the beginning.
Yeah.
We're back to the beginning, but just for going out and having fun, the Rogue River for a 4-day float, camping out of your kayak, that is a tremendous, it's a super fun experience, and there's a class of boats now for that Jackson has a new one this year. We saw a couple new ones last year, so it's not really a cutting edge trend, but I think that's a trend that we've seen. The longer whitewater boat is definitely an interesting trend.
I think I would agree, and I think the bigger part of that is we're trying. I think for a whole probably 10 years whitewater was all about park and play, park and huck, And I think, I mean, I don't know, I don't have a motivational study to suggest this, but I certainly didn't come into this sport to learn how to surf. I came into whitewater to run rivers and to go on adventures. And I think for a long time there, we took that, we didn't really take it away, we just stopped doing it because we were all into it. And I think the crossover boat, I think, will appeal to people who are going to come to the rivers, because I honestly believe that's still what people come to whitewater to do. I still think they want to run rivers.
I think they do, and I'll say also that the cutting edge, the athletes that are really pushing the limits, I think they were the ones that went up, and not in crossover boats, but in regular creek boats, and started doing the exploratory paddling. These guys do. I mean, they'll stick a sleeping bag and a handful of Cliff Bars into a boat and go out for 3 days and run hard Class 5 rivers. And of course they document it, and you and I benefit from that because our websites and magazines are full of these amazing experiences that these guys bring back. But I really think that's coming from the sport.
But I think that filters down to a new paddler into class, because you can do that and paddle Class 2, 3.
Right.
So I think that I see that as maybe not the only future, but I see that as a future for whitewater.
Absolutely, because it is that adventure experience, and you could have a figure like Eric Boomer, who's a wonderful cutting edge athlete, Arctic explorer, all the rest of the stuff. But really, what he makes me want to do, he wants me to go out for a weekend, because I've got a weekend, I can go out and do that, and I don't have to cross an ice cap, but I can go out and have a good time, and the equipment is being made by the manufacturers now that we can do that.
We just did some whitewater kayaking for our most recent episode on Discovery Channel, and Ottawa River has so many spots where you can stop and camp, and it's just they're not huge rapids, they're 2, 3s, little 4s, and seeing a lot of the spots as we went down, we're like, ooh, I could stop there and camp for a few days and then continue it, and it adds a total different side to it, to be camped out next to it, have your meal, and just keep
Where's
going.
this?
On the Ottawa River in Pemberton, in Pembroke.
Ontario.
Yeah.
Are we set up to do questions? Are we set up, as a question of the AV guys here, are we set up to do questions from the audience? Can we do that? Yeah, we can do that. Do you guys have any questions at this point, folks that are hanging out? That's great.
We're supposed to put somebody out there with that's going to give us a softball to get things started, right?
That's okay. So at this point, I think we should probably just thank everybody for coming. John, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Roberto,
Thanks,
Rick,
Scott.
Jeff, and Reed.
Can I say something? Free beer right here.
Can you say something?
If you guys haven't done it yet, get on a stand-up board and get out there and try it. It's the funnest thing you're going to do. Outside of kayaking, of course, right?
Of course, and I'll close with a funny quote from Reg Lake, who some of you may know is a leading figure in our sport for many, many years. And I asked Reg the other night if he was doing much stand-up paddling, and he looked me deadpan right in the eyes like, I'm not going to try that. I'm afraid I might like it too much.
Yeah.
Hey, you should see when I go back to Hawaii and I'm out there on my stand-up board, when there's a swell, all the surfers are looking at me like, what are you doing out here?
Yeah.
And I just smile. I say I'm supporting and I'm promoting what I actually do. If I don't, I'm a hypocrite. So and they kind of just sit there and they laugh, and then I start getting waves.
Nice.
Thanks to Outdoor Retailer for hosting this stage. Thank you all for joining us and spending some time with us this afternoon, and I hope you all paddle forever. Thanks.
All right, thanks.
All right.